Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary with the knife video for you, and today I've got maybe a bit of a throwback. This is sort of a classic design at this point. This is the Spyderco Manix 2. Now, you may be looking at this going, the Manix 2 I always see is a full flat ground. Well, initially when the Manix 2 came out, and I'm not gonna, there's a whole history here, okay? There was an original Manix, and then there was the Manix 2, which I do think is a pretty big improvement over the original Manix, and then there have been subsequent improvements and changes to the Manix 2, okay? So we're kind of looking at a picture in time here, when this is not the original Manix 2, because I think the original Manix 2 had 154 cm blade steel. This is a step up from that to the S30V blade steel, but it doesn't have the full flat grind. So it's sort of in a progression, okay? And that's one of the things that Spyderco says. If you read your education paper, you read Spyderco's website, you'll find they have this, continuous improvement where they're gonna make changes to their models as they see fit. And they've done that with this knife quite a bit over time. Now, I think most people would say the full flat grind is an improvement. For me, I really wanted this configuration. I really like the way it looks. I actually really like hollow ground blades, especially for EDC. I feel like they're better for EDC tasks. You know, if I want a kitchen knife, which is just full flat ground, hey, I'm gonna pick a kitchen knife. That said, it's not that I don't like full flat grinds. I have lots of full flat ground blades. PM2 is one of my all-time favorites. I'm going to bring this in for comparison anyway, so I may as well show you. This is the Manix 2 XL, and of course, it's a full flat grind, and I love it. I really like this knife. But let's say this. Because this knife is hollow ground, it does not mean that I don't love it. In fact, I prefer this to the full flat ground Manix 2. Now, I'll bring this back in a second for size comparison, but I just wanted to get that all out there. So there's a whole, there's a whole continuum here, and I'm going to add this one last thing, and that is if you watch this video and really like this variation of the Manix 2, I'm going to tell you, it took me a while to find this. There are like no retailers selling the hollow ground Manix 2 right now. I mean, I didn't check every single one, but I checked Blade HQ, I checked KnifeWorks, I checked Knife Center. I didn't check Warriors and Wonders, and I probably should have, maybe checked there. But here's what I'm going to say about this. This is an older version, probably like a 2011 or something like that. However, you may find some retailers that have some leftover stock of these, because my impression, now I could be totally out to lunch on this, my sense is that the full flat ground version is much more popular. So a lot of places may have, when they got the full flat ground version in stock and put it up on their site, people may have tended toward that, and so they may still have some of these left over. But they're not making them this way anymore, to the best of my knowledge, okay? So now you've got all the introduction. Let's get into the specifics on this blade. I've got to say, first of all, if you're just watching this to say, hey, should I buy it? Do you like it? Do you not like it? I really like it. I like it better than the lightweight. I like it almost the same as the Manix 2 XL. Okay, since it's up here, we may as well do a little comparison. You can see that this is 8 inches, this is 9 inches. When you hold them side by side, it feels like the perception is, and you can probably get this as you're watching this, you go, whoa, that Manix 2 standard size is quite small. It's actually not that small. This blade is 9 inches, this blade is 8 inches. Now, one thing I will say is this is a stout little guy. Okay, these knives weigh about the same, which is a little bit crazy, right? Like, this is a 5-ounce knife. It's very dense, and one of the big reasons is this is heavily skeletonized. This is like not skeletonized at all. Okay, so there is some weight there. Now there are some other differences. I'm not going to get into every single one of them, but for size comparison and for the sake of difference, I just wanted to show you that. Now let's get into specifically this knife. It is 4 5/8 closed, under 2 inches here, about an inch and a half or so thick. So it's a little smaller. This is basically 2 inches, 1 7/8 inches. So you can see it's a bit smaller, but not a lot smaller. It is, it does take up less space in your pocket. Okay. Now let's keep going with this. The blade is 3 3/8 with 3 inches of cutting edge. So say that again, 3 3/8 inch blade, 3 inches of cutting edge. All of these sizes, by the way, are going to be the same. If you go back and watch my Manix lightweight video, again, great blade, very capable. I prefer this, but nothing against the lightweight. The sizes will all be the same though. So 8 inches overall from here to here. That's made up with a 4 5/8 inch handle and a 3 3/8 inch blade. The weight on this, as I mentioned, is 5 ounces. So it's pretty heavy for its size. This is an 8-inch knife at 5 ounces. So you're gonna go, holy cow, you know, I know other 8-inch knives. I know more than 8-inch knives that weigh a lot less than that. Yeah, that's true. This was sort of designed to be a stout little sort of heavy duty folder. And I think it is pretty well built, okay? There were some weird complaints about this initially, and I don't know, I've used this quite a bit, and I have had, keep in mind that I've had experiences with the Manix Lightweight, the Manix XL, and now this Manix, and so I don't see any major glaring problems with this, in addition to all my other Spydercos, right? You know, I can compare this to an awful lot of blades when it comes to performance, and I think this is a fine little knife. Okay, it's on the smaller end for knives that I like to carry. I prefer a 3 1/2 inch blade, and this doesn't quite make 3 1/2 inches. Although, let me say this: I think this knife could have had a 3 1/2 inch blade. I think there's enough room. Now the centering on this one is not good. You'll see that now, but see how there's more handle available here. We could have made that 3 1/2 inch point. I think, you know, an extra 1/8 of an inch, although it wouldn't be the end of the world. It wouldn't ruin the knife to not have it, and it wouldn't ruin it to have it. You know, anyway, either here nor there. It's on the small end of what I like to carry anyway. Okay, that's the point I'm trying to make here. So there you go. That's size and weight, and you need to know that for what you're getting, it is a fairly heavy knife. But 5 ounces, to be honest, in my mind, and here's how I see this. Really, anything for me under 6 ounces is pretty comfortable to EDC. Okay, once you go over 6 ounces, now I start looking for, hey, what am I getting for this extra weight? But under that, I'm not really going to complain, unless it's just crazy, like a 3-inch knife that weighs, you know, 5.5 ounces. I'd be like, what the heck? But otherwise, if it's between 7.5 and 8.5 inches, and it weighs between 3.5 and 5.5 ounces, it's all, you know, no big deal. So, and that's my mileage. You may say, no, a knife has to be under 4 ounces. It has to be under 5. Whatever your number may be, that's fine for you. For me, I don't really mind anything in those ranges I just kind of gave you. Now, let me zoom in as we talk about the blade, because this is a pretty cool looking blade, and one of the things I like about this knife. So, okay, the camera doesn't want to listen. There we go. So, I'm going to try to keep this in focus as best I can. This blade here is, you know, the 3 3/8 inches that I talked about. It's S30V. You can see that over on this side. So S30V, there's the Spyder from Spyderco. It is made in Golden, Colorado, USA Earth. That's over on this side, and Eric Glesser's maker's mark is on here. Eric Glesser's knives tend to have this very leafy blade shape. You know, it is a fairly, you know, Spyderco has these leaf-shaped blades, and Eric Glesser has really embraced that. So you look at the Dice or the Domino or this or whatever, you're going to find that leaf-shaped blade. Generally nowadays you find a full flat grind, and again, I don't think it has to have a full flat grind. This you can see is saber ground, and saber ground just means, you know, you're down here and it's an even grind on both sides of the knife. This could be a hollow grind. If it was a higher grind, it would just be a high hollow grind, but the fact that you've got this sort of even grind on both sides makes it a saber grind. And I actually really like the way this knife looks. Not only that, but I really like the way it performs. I know, you know, a lot of people, especially Nut and Fancy, talk about a full flat grind being, you know, just the end all and be all. But I have done lots of cutting with this, and remember, I also have experience with the full flat ground blade in the Manix 2 Lightweight, and I find this to be just as good, if not better, especially for EDC tasks, because although I would agree that a full flat grind is going to perform better for food prep, I'm not usually using my pocket knife for food prep. The odd time I am, and you know, in that case, would I prefer a full flat grind? Probably, but just the other day, I had to slice up a bunch of apples with this, and it worked just fine. It wasn't like I was like, oh man, I just can't cut apples. It worked fine. So I don't really understand that. What I would argue is that a hollow grind allows you to have an excellent edge geometry in a thicker blade. And so you get more strength, you get more durability, and you don't have to sacrifice anything in terms of edge geometry. And for most everyday carry tasks, we're using just that first 1/4 inch or so of the blade. And because this is a hollow grind, that first 1/4 inch is super thin and just super well done. So I actually really like this. In addition, I think in this blade, as you look at, I'm going to try to get the whole thing on camera here. There you go. So as you look at the whole knife overall, I actually think the extra line created by the saber grind looks really cool. I think it adds just a bit of interest. It adds one more thing kind of going on the blade, and I think I actually really like it, and I do prefer it here. Now, S30V blade steel, I'll comment briefly on that, but probably if you're watching this, you know that S30V is a pretty good steel. Takes an edge very nicely, and here again, I love the hollow grind. I can tell you I've sharpened this, and because of that hollow grind, the edge geometry is excellent, and this thing will take a razor sharp edge quite readily. Okay, so I've had very good luck putting an exceptionally sharp edge on this blade. Even better, yes, than my flat ground blades. Flat ground blades sharpen up fine, and Spyderco is going to be fairly consistent with their 30-degree secondary bevel there, but my experience with this knife is that it takes an edge very well and holds it well. It's just a great performing blade. So I don't think the saber grind takes anything at all away, and in fact I think it adds something to this knife. Now other knives where I would say, yeah, I don't want a saber grind blade, sure there are, but in this knife I really like it. Let's move on to lockup and deployment. I know I'm getting out of focus there for a second. There we go. Notice this knife is a free dropper. This pivot is as tight as I can get it, and there is just a minuscule, like it's hardly noticeable, but it is there. There's a little bit of blade play. Now, here's the rub. I cannot get rid of that blade play because of the way this pivot screw is designed. It has a fat section in the middle. So I don't know how to really tell you how this works other than to show you my arm. Okay, and you see how my arm, if you cut this off here and you sort of added another piece on the other side, the pivot looks like this. There's a small side, there's a small circle, then it flares out to a large size, and this is the side that goes through the blade of the knife, and then it shrinks down again. Okay, so it's called a bushing pivot system, and then the two washers go out here on the outside of the blade, and then the handle goes on. Okay, so right inside of here, here's your pivot screw. As it goes through, in the middle here, right where it goes through the blade, it's slightly larger. Now, what that means is no matter how tight you tighten these screws, you can't put pressure directly on the blade, which is awesome from a, if you're Spyderco and you're trying to say, let's make all Manixes function the same way so that there's no really user error involved in getting this blade to drop freely. It's going to be totally consistent. Okay, great. Well, they've certainly achieved that. However, if the tolerances are just a little off and you get a blade that has some blade play, now I'm sure this is super small, so it would be, I have no doubt, within factory tolerances, which is great, which means it's a waste of time for me to send this to Spyderco. However, it's barely noticeable. The only thing you could possibly do is put thicker washers in here, and you might by that get rid of that extremely minuscule blade plate. For my usage, I don't really care, okay? It doesn't affect the functionality of the knife. Yeah, it's a little disconcerting, but this knife is going to be a user for me, and I think it's just going to stay just as it is. Now, on the bright side of that equation, with that, as I say, almost imperceptible. If you just hold the knife this way and you go like this, you can't really feel it. You really have to muscle it in there. So you can muscle a little bit of blade play. It's hardly any, and it's certainly not the end of the world. Now, with that blade play, the way it's set up, this knife drops very free. okay? And that is nice. So this is a fun knife to play with. The performance is very, very good. It just has that little bit of side-to-side play. So talk about lockup and deployment. Deploys extremely well. It's very smooth, totally free dropper, very fast. You know, all of the fun ways that we like to deploy our Spydercos you can definitely do with this. And you get a very strong lockup. I mean, up and down, it is solid as a rock. And I do really like this ball bearing, this caged ball bearing lock system, okay? I do like it better. If you want to debate this further, I would send you over to Exacto's channel where he has a more involved discussion about this. It's of course very similar to the axis lock in functionality. That is, you know, you're pulling back on the lock, it's sliding over the blade tang, and that's how it's achieving the lockup. But, okay, here's the but, the spring is superior to the Omega spring. It just is. The way this spring is, it's a coil spring, it's going to last longer and give you less issues in terms of failure than the Omega spring that you find in Benchmade's. Now, I still love the Omega spring. I personally have never had one break on me, but from an engineering standpoint, from just how things work, a coil spring is more durable than an Omega spring. That's all there is to it. That's not really something we can argue about. Now, if we say which one's more functional, which one is easier to deploy, which one is more comfortable on your fingers, all of those questions are different questions. When it just comes down to which one is going to perform better over the long term, you know, if you had 1,000 Manixes and 1,000 Griptilians and you test them all over and over again, the Manixes are going to hold up better. All right. Now, over to functionality. I cannot work this knife one-handed. Okay, let me just try. Yeah, I can't do it. I mean, one finger. I can do it one-handed, no problem, but I need two fingers. Let me show you from the back. So see how both these fingers have to pull back on the lock. With my Benchmade's, I don't have to do that. One finger, this one, whatever, doesn't matter. They work all the time. I'm going to back out just a little bit so you can still get a good look at the knife, but I have a little more room on screen. So lockup is very good. I think the caged ball lock is a very good lock. It's just not operable for me with one finger. Now, your mileage may vary. You may have no problem actuating this with one finger. Some people, by the way, do cut a coil off of this spring and then put it back in. I'm not going to do that. I don't mind using two fingers to actuate the lock. All right, so lockup and deployment are both acceptable. Very strong lock. You're not going to have any issues with the lock on this knife. You may, as I said, now I have a little bit of blade play here, and if that happens to a Manix, now I'm going to say this, I'm not sure if the current gen of Manix 2s have that ball bearing, that same pivot system as this one does, okay? I just don't know that. If you want to comment below, you know, informing me, that would be really helpful so that everybody who watches this can see, you know, yes or no, they do have or don't have that bushing pivot system. Okay, so that's lockup and deployment. Very fast, very smooth, very fun. Kind of all the stuff we look for from a Spyderco in terms of lockup and deployment. Let's back out here and talk about the handle and a couple more general things. Handle on this is just what we're used to, G10 stainless steel liners. They are proud liners, so that just means the liners extend out past the G10 a little bit, and they do it really functionally. The jimping on this is very good. The finger choils on this are very comfortable. When you get this in hand, you are really locked in, and that's the same thing I said about the Manix 2 XL. Okay, both of these are very, very ergonomically well done. I cannot complain about the ergonomics. They're different. You know, I know this is still the Manix 2, but they didn't just, by the way, I'll give you a quick look. Notice how they didn't just increase the size of this. They actually changed the design, okay? The blade shape is different, the handle shape is different. There's a lot of the same features, but there are those differences, okay? So the Manix 2 XL is not just a larger Manix 2. It's actually a different design. Now, which one do I prefer? I really like both. Okay, I'll carry both. I may even carry both at the same time. I really like both of these blades. Extremely comfortable. Now, the one thing I will say about this is, both the it is only, you know, tip up. Let's see, there you go. So pocket clip is here or here. It is higher. I'm not going to put a Casey Lynch clip on this because I feel like this carries deep enough. And this little tab at the end gives me something to grab onto. So perfectly fine. There is no skeletonizing on these liners, okay? They're just solid pieces of stainless steel, which is fine. Although I think you could skeletonize them without sacrificing anything in terms of functionality, okay? And that is adding weight. I don't know, maybe you'd get it down to 4.7 ounces, 4.5 ounces. But you'd have to be pretty aggressive to do that. And then you'd be sacrificing a little. I don't think you'd be sacrificing anything in terms of functionality or strength, but you might get a little flex here, and people have complained about that, okay? One other thing to note is if you're gonna take this knife apart, this lanyard tube is flanged on the ends, okay? So instead of just sliding it through like on all kinds of Spydercos, Dominoes, and different ones, instead of just sliding it through, it's slid through and then the end is flared. So there's a flange around it that actually holds this handle. That means it's not easily disassembled. In fact, I wouldn't, if you're gonna take this apart, you take it apart by pulling everything apart and just swinging this, okay? You know what I mean by that? So you're gonna leave this lanyard hole alone because once you pull that off, something's gotta give, okay? Something's gotta bend, something's gotta change, and you don't wanna do that. So you just spin this way, do what you gotta do, spin it back, and you're fine. By the way, you know, unless you really need to, you know, how do I phrase this? Don't say, Kevin told me to take my knife apart, so I did it, and now Spyderco won't honor my warranty. I'm warning you now, if you take it apart, they may not honor the warranty. I've sent knives to Spyderco that I've taken apart and had no problems. I've heard other people do that, but then you're going to come across the odd person who says, hey, I took my knife apart, something went wrong, I sent it to Spyderco, they said we're not fixing it. You know, it could happen, so I'm not making any promises about that. All right, so back to this knife. The handle is comfortable, the G10 is grippy, the ergonomics are excellent, the pocket clip is very functional, typical Spyderco clip. It is left or right side tip up carry only. There's nothing up here, and I don't even know where you put the option to carry it tip down. I don't know why you would. Okay, I know some of you like the tip down option. Generally, you know, if someone who works at Benchmade buys this knife, I don't know what they're going to do because they just feel like you can't carry a knife this way or they're cutting your hand off. So there you go. It is tip up, left or right side carry. I think that's everything that I wanted to say about this. I'm trying to look here and see if there's any major glaring omission that I've left out. I don't think so. I think that's pretty much all you need to know. I really like this knife. If you're looking at buying one, highly, highly, highly recommended. Do I recommend it over other Spydercos, you know, the PM2 or the Domino or whatever? Well, I'm going to do some comparison videos, so you'll find out about that. But I think it's a great knife along with lots of other great knives. Okay, there you go, guys. Talk to you later.